Let me just get to the point of sharing. I'm sorry, I should have done that first. Okay. So I'm just getting my screen set up. I apologize. I should have done this before we started recording. All right, I'm just going to leave it alone. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Mocyk. I'm one of the instructional designers on campus. And today I wanted to present on accessibility, different definitions related to accessibility. I recognize that a lot of times the terms related to digital accessibility can seem very technical. And even for myself, I've had to ask some clarifying questions to understand what people were talking about when they had discussions on digital accessibility. And I thought that now that we're further into learning more about it, I could take this opportunity and share some of this information with you in maybe a non-technical way. I'll do my best at least. Trying to make something that's technical, non-technical, it only works to a certain degree, but I'm going to do my best. All right. So the first thing that I want you to know is that we're just going to brush on the surface of these different terms. There's lots of other trainings that are going on through CELT and other means that we'll talk about more in this presentation. And then the other big thing that I wanted to say is that while we're talking about this, depending on your role, you may not need to know every detail about digital accessibility, but the big thing is that it's important that you know that it's important, right? That you know that it needs to be addressed, whether you're the content creator or you're working with other content creators. So we're just going to kind of go through and give you a brief overview of these different terms, and then also share some resources on where you could get assistance. So this really isn't about how to, it's about just knowing what these terms are. So the first one we're going to talk about is accommodations. Accommodations benefit single individuals. They're typically on our campus, it's set up through accessibility resources for the students. It could be an example of extended time on an exam. That would be a student accommodations. Students and staff receive accommodations, but they're very personalized for them. So why are we talking about this? Accommodations are always going to exist, but a concern with accommodations is that its approach is more of a reactive approach to student or even staff needs. So the next definition we're going to talk about is accessibility. Well, that's a problem because the term accessibility has many meanings. So you have access of just being able to, access something, but in the terms that we're referring to, it's we have physical accessibility, which could be an example of automatic doors or elevators. And then we also have digital accessibility, which is anything related to a computer, a tablet, a phone. It could be something like listening to an audiobook or a touch screen, using a touch screen, closed captions with videos. Everyone benefits from digital accessibility. It improves the user experience for us all. And so I just wanted to consider different examples of accessibility. So if we're watching closed captions on of a video while we're sitting on a train or a bus or anywhere, that would be an example of something that is considered accessible. Listening to an audio book because your eyes are strained after a long day of work. So SUNY Oswego is taking a vested interest in this for several years now. And why am I telling you this kind of information? Well, many think of accessibility as it relates to how easy it is to gain access to something. Ultimately, that's not wrong. But as it relates to today's presentation, we're talking about digital accessibility. Digital accessibility is all about designing with accessibility in mind. It's a proactive approach to remove barriers for others. So let's dig into that more. So assistive technologies. They're tools, they're devices and software designed to help people with disabilities interact with digital and physical environments more effectively. So I provided screen readers, screen magnifiers, speech recognition software. There's things, it's called JAWS, NVDA, which is non-visual desktop access. There's VoiceOver, there's Zoom text and Windows magnifier, Dragon naturally speaking. There's some built-in tools in Windows. Why am I telling you all of this? Well, I think that having a basic understanding of what assistive technologies exist can help you understand why addressing digital accessibility is important. So this next one, it's called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They're WCAG. So who they are, they offer a set of rules and recommendations designed for making websites more digitally accessible. Their goal is to ensure everyone, regardless of abilities, can access and interact with digital content. So I shared the source. It's w3g.org. And so they focus on things like making text readable, ensuring websites can be navigated through with only using a keyboard. So if they weren't using a mouse and were relying solely on the tab key or different keys on the keyboard, that they could have a similar experience as somebody who is using a mouse and has full access to the materials. So there's different versions of WCAG because the technology and accessibility needs have evolved. At this point, there's 2.0 and 2.1. I'd consider that probably at this point the minimum standard. 2.2 is more inclusive. However, there is 3.0. It's on the horizon and is really what standard we all should be striving for. As technology advances, WCAG standards are going to evolve too. Taking it another level, within those WCAG standards, they have A, AA, and AAA compliance within those standards. Here's an example of how those levels range as it relates to video content. So A could be having captions provided for pre-recorded content. AA could be captions provided for all live video meetings like Zoom. AAA could be sign language interpretation that's provided for all pre-recorded audio content. So why would I be telling you this? Well, I hear these terms around campus. They talk about, the WCAG standards, and they talk about, what kind of AA or AAA, where are we with a particular level of accessibility? If you find yourself in a situation where you're wondering whether we're in compliance or not in compliance, the WCAG website could provide some assistance. So it's probably not something as an entry level you'd be researching too much about, but it is something to know it exists. And when we're talking about those things, that's what we're referencing. So the next thing that I wanted to share was about DQ University. DQ, it's a website that serves as a great resource for training and for determining how to address digital accessibility concerns. I pulled from their website. They offer trainings and on-demand reference materials for every level and every area of expertise in digital accessibility. So why am I telling you this? Well, SUNY has a contract with DQ. You can go to their CPD website and get started with it. It is a great way to research like a situation where you're wondering whether or not, how to handle a certain circumstance. You can actually search their website for different resources to determine whether or not you're using the best practice that they're suggesting. So again, it's good to know that it exists. If you have time for the training, I definitely recommend them. And let's keep going. So the next one I wanted to talk about is this Americans with Disability Act. It covers a wide range of areas to ensure equal rights and opportunities for individuals with disabilities. I pulled from their website federal civil rights laws that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in everyday activities. So why am I telling you this? Well, because there's been a recent decision that calls out a specific area of inclusivity that impacts all of us on campus. This brings me to the Americans with Disability Act Title II regulations. Now, I pulled a source. It was called Level Access, but there's multiple sources for it. I just like the way they explained it and some plain language. But the rule requires state and local governments to ensure that their services, their programs, and activities meet web accessibility standards and are accessible to individuals with disabilities. So this is a really big deal on our campus. It does have a deadline of April 2026. It means that it impacts all of us, whether it's faculty, whether it's students or staff. It includes everything from websites to social media posts to hockey tickets and any content that's created by others that you use. There's still an obligation to make sure that what you're presenting is considered accessible to others. All right, so skip that slide, sorry about that. But it's public schools, community colleges, hospitals, state and local courts. It is a pretty big deal, and it's really just taking a piece of the ADA, American with Disability Act, and um, you know, pulling out to say how important it was in this area that we address this. So it's something that we should have been doing, something that our campus has been striving to do, but now they're actually like telling us you must do this. So let's get into more of the terms related to digital accessibility. Now that you have some background, I wanted to share some of these terms. So structured content. I hear this and you're thinking that if it's in paragraph form, then it's structured, but that's not what we're really talking about. It's really the behind the scenes setup of your content that allows assistive technologies to properly function as it should. You may or may not be able to visually see that the content is structured. We're going to talk about what makes content structured with these few definitions. But then also we're going to go into more details of what we actually mean by structured content. So clear navigation, information is presented in a logical order. You're not asking them to read, all over the page. A consistent layout so that it maintains predictable patterns, such as each page starting with an introduction, ending with a closing. Accessible images, that the images are explained somehow throughout the document or as an alternative text. We'll talk about that. And then this thing called responsive design. It's making sure that the content can be accessed on multiple various devices. A smartphone, a tablet, a desktop, that it works on all of those devices. So if you've ever tried to look up something on your phone, and you're trying to be able to see the whole page on your phone and it just won't work for you, that's what we're talking about. Designing it so that in those instances, those materials can be accessed on your smartphone. And structured content is going to be about the next things that we're going to talk about, starting with headings. Okay, so headings are best described when thinking of titles and subtitles of an outline. So if you have a major section, thinking of your syllabus, if you have a major section of your outline, it's going to be considered what we would call a heading 1. If it's somewhat important, it's something that you indented into an outline, it could be considered heading 2, and something less important would be heading 3. So when we're looking at headings, we're trying to allow the screen reader to easily navigate through the content. If we do this thing called setting up the headings, it will allow the screen reader to jump from section to section within the document. So this is a big deal. So in the toolbar, this is what I just wanted to show you a little bit about what we're talking about. In the toolbar, this is from a Google Doc. you'll see that it has the option. So this is Times New Roman, and then it shows. You could mark something just by highlighting it and calling it a heading 1. You could highlight another section like along down here and just mark it as a heading 2. So there's a document that I'm going to end up sharing with you. It will show some headings and it allows the student or the user to skip from section to section. And the one example that I always give is when we're talking about a syllabus. Course schedule is very common to be the last part of a syllabus. If we do not use headings, a student would need to listen to the entire syllabus to get to the course schedule. So it is a big deal. It's actually one of the very easy things to implement when it comes to digital accessibility. So it's a good starting point if you're trying to learn more about it. The next one we'll talk about are lists. Lists differentiate between plain paragraph text and a list of items. Many times we see instances where people will use the dash symbol when making a list. But the problem is when a screen reader is being used, it will simply read dash and not alert the reader that there's a list. Lists are really great because they help with the readability of large text, like large blocks of text. So if you have like instructions or something that students, need to pay attention to everything that is being asked of them, list is probably a better option than giving them a large block of text in a paragraph. So we have bulleted lists that are used for unordered items, and we have numbered lists, which are used for sequence matters. And again, if you look at the toolbar it's in Word and Google Docs, you'll see the list options here. So consider that the next time you have to create a list, avoid using the dash. Contextual hyperlinks. Now, this is, it's really just a link to a website page that's written in words instead of the web address. The words should be words or phrases that appropriately reflect where the person is being directed to. We want to avoid things like click here and learn more because it doesn't provide enough context for the user to know where the link will take them. So let's look at the example over here. If a screen reader, if a hyperlink was provided and the screen reader was reading through, it would read HTTP and keep going all the way through. If the contextual hyperlink is provided, it's going to say something like web page student handbook. It's a much more easier experience for somebody relying on a screen reader. It's also helpful for us because we don't need to question where click here is. We know it's going to go to the student handbook. So the next one is alt text or image descriptions. Alt text, text equivalents, image descriptions, interchangeable terms. They're used to describe the message being conveyed by an image. If a person is blind and using a screen reader, the person will rely on alt text or text equivalents to share information about the image. So, but it also could be for instances where someone isn't looking at the screen or can't see the screen. It's too far, something like that. They're not able to see it. These text equivalents, it's really important to make sure that no message is lost for anyone that is reviewing the information. So alt text should be provided for all images. And what we find is like we'll see instances where there's charts or graphs or comics, things like that that share a lot of information within this one image. A lot of times we find it more helpful just to include that information from the image within the document itself, like in a text format, like below the image. So you could reference the image and say the image above talks about, X, Y, and Z. So there's ways to work with it if the image is very, it's a complex image to explain, but it is something that we need to address because we don't want people losing out on information just because the information is presented in a picture format. So looking over at the toolbars, you can right click on the image, and a lot of times it will tell you alt text. It gives you the space to add the description. And again, this is pulled from Google, but Microsoft Word has a similar setup to get you going with that. Color contrast. It's all about making sure that the text and important elements on a screen stand out clearly from the background of the screen. Among others, it's really important for those who are colorblind or visually impaired. But there's different ways to like check to make sure that your colors aren't too close. Like if you've ever seen an instance where like somebody used a bright yellow against the white and you're just, you're kind of looking at the screen going, this is terrible. I can't stand this. That's probably a good indication that the contrast may not be appropriate for it. But a good way to check is turn the document that you're working into grayscale. If you can't tell the difference in grayscale, then it probably means that the contrast is not high enough. And then there's also like variations of it. So it might be, there's some different tools out there that are called color contrast testers, and they can help you determine if there's enough color contrast between the two. And what it'll do is it will say like, maybe this is a big for large print that the contrast is enough, but it's not enough in small print. So there's all these different recommendations, and just knowing that these tools exist, I didn't recommend anything to you, but I wanted you to know that they exist. And the way that they figure those things out, there's these things called a hex code, which simply explain it's just a code to identify the color. So if you look at this example here, all I did is in the Google toolbar, I clicked on color, and it showed the hex code for this particular color here. And that's what you would use in order to use the color contrast testers. I don't think if you have any questions about it, a lot of them are built in at this point. I know that Brightspace has a built-in tool for it, but just knowing those things exist is helpful. This next one we'll talk about are tables. Tables are used for tabular data. So you're going to press tab, tab, tab. They must be formatted to allow screen readers to read through the table in an organized manner. We're going to want to make sure that if you do use tables, that they have the header row, which is this part up here, the product, the price per unit, the quantity sold, and revenue. It has to be designated within the table. If that step isn't complete, the table could read top to bottom instead of left to right in the way that the table was intended to be read. Okay, so you want to call out to make sure that it's set up properly so that the screen reader can read the table properly. We want to avoid the temptation that using tables is a convenient way to lay out or organize other types of information. We've learned a lot more about tables for a while. We were telling people to avoid them altogether. It really just comes down to your comfort with technology and using the tables to determine whether or not you would want to use tables within your content. Let's go to this one. All right, this next one are closed captions, live captions, and transcripts. So closed captions, we've seen them. This is closed captions with recorded video content. You can see the words. A lot of people use closed captions at this point. Even when they are watching the TV, they still use the closed captions coming along the bottom of the page, telling them what the words are being said. But then there's also live captions, which are very commonly used in Zoom calls. And that's kind of what's going on in this session that I have this image of Kate DeForest. She's talking about wanting to remove barriers as many barriers as possible to make the content easy for people to use so they don't have to think about it, they don't have to struggle with it, they don't have to ask additional questions. They can just sort of use it to the best of their ability. So I just read what was on it, the image demonstrating a live caption that was used during a Zoom call. Transcripts are provided with pre-recorded video content. It could be after a Zoom call, as a transcript could be created. So transcripts are really nice for anyone and everyone. I use them all the time with different sessions that I haven't been able to attend recordings. I want to be able to look at a particular point of a recording. I can read the transcript to see what was said on those in those areas. But so the transcripts is actually something that is after the fact. There are that you could receive after the fact that share the details of what was being said. There are some live transcripts too that exist, but just knowing that these different options are available and that we should be focusing on using all of these when we're creating videos, considering the imagery that's being used in the video, this is all important. And I just realized I skipped a piece of it. So something that I learned this past semester when we were talking about videos, it's actually this past year, was the imagery used in the video. So something that I hadn't thought about as you're creating a video content is, to be conscientious about not sharing new information through the images of a video, right? So if an example, if a video were saying that I'm so excited you are here, and the video shows an image of someone at the Murano Campus Center, if you were creating a video, changing your script to say, I am so excited you are here at the Murano Campus Center at SUNY Oswego, um, the user is not missing out on whether they see it or they hear it, the message is the same. They see it. The message is the same. They are able to retrieve that information. So it just was kind of an interesting piece of things that I've learned more about digital accessibility that I hadn't considered up to that point. All the hidden messages within images and related to videos. So that was kind of an add-on. Sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I wanted to share it anyway. So this next one is talking about fonts. Determining how a text appears when displayed or printed plays a crucial role in readability and communication. We want to be careful when we choose fonts. We don't want something that has too much of a script look or the letters are too close together. It could be a barrier for someone using a magnifying software program to read the font. Font size is important. For documents, they should be 10 to 12 is probably best, but for documents and presentations that are shown in class up on a screen, recommended font size is actually more like a 24 point or higher. When deciding on fonts, we want to make sure that these fonts that they don't convey personalities. There's a chance that a missed message could be there depending on the font choices. You want to come across as fun or something like that by using a different type of font. We want to make sure that there's no missed messages by your choice of font. So something that I hadn't thought too much about, but actually does make some sense when you think about it. So this next term, we're almost done, I promise. This next one is about plain language. Plain language is a form of communication that is written so that anyone can understand it from the first time that it's being read or heard. It helps people with cognitive disabilities or individuals whose primary language may not be English. So when do you use plain language? Well, when we're talking about it, we're just talking about the general communications like emails or instructions on a test or a summary of content, content on a website. It is not for instances where it's within the discipline. It's not for your course readings. That type of information would be read at a higher would be written at a higher level. But understanding why plain language exists and why it's important, it's trying to remove some barriers so that students or anyone really can read something the first time, have an understanding of it, and not need to go back to, figure out what different words mean along the way. So in this example here, I've got complex language. In the event that you experience any technical difficulties while attempting to access the online portal, it is advisable to consult the user manual or reach out to the support team via the contact information provided therein. That's a lot to say. The revised one, if you have trouble accessing the online portal, check the user manual or contact the support team using the information provided. It is much easier to follow along and you know what needs to be done. So now that we've kind of gone through and shared some of the terms that are related to accessibility, I did want to point out that we have things like the accessibility checkers. Microsoft and Google each have their own. Ally is inside of Brightspace, and there are some add-on ones that you could get where it will allow you to check your document to see what could be improved for accessibility. Um, just remember, it is a guide. Do not solely rely on these checkers. There are ways to work around it to make it look like it's accessible, and it is not. So you still do need to understand the basic principles of accessibility, but it does help in certain circumstances. And if you don't have an accessibility checker, it's something to investigate to look into more getting. All right, so this is kind of an add-on that I had said in the presentation I would talk about reading order. And so I'm going to take this moment to say this. So when we are working with PowerPoints or Google Slides, the slide titles that go across the top, like in this example, on this page here, this here, they should be unique so that if a person using a screen reader is jumping from slide to slide, they will know, they'll be able to determine the contents of the slide. So in an instance where you might have to continue on to a second slide, you could label it 1 of 2, 2 of 2, but you do want to make the title unique so that it doesn't just continue to say PowerPoint slide, PowerPoint slide, PowerPoint slide. Um, this will improve the user experience for people using assistive technology and honestly anybody. Reading order is crucial, and I'm actually going to show you an example of that. But one of the big things is if you add a picture to a slide and then you follow it with adding your bullet points of content, and then you follow it by the title, how it is entered into the system, or that it is not going to read to the student from top to bottom. You actually have to designate how you want it to be read to the student. The step always needs to be manually determined, as the software is not smart enough to figure out whether you want the picture first, the image first, or whether you want the words or the title. It doesn't know which way you want it. You actually have to determine that information in the PowerPoint. I'm going to show you what that looks like. All right, so consider this one here. I've got learning objective 3 is in the title. I've got a picture of a magnifying glass, and then it says record transactions in a journal and a post-journal entry to the ledger. So I actually made a screenshot of the reading order, and as it stands right now, it is going to show the Title 1 learning objectives, so that learning first. It is going to show the record transactions, then it's going to show the slide number, and then it's going to show the image. If that's not what you want, that's why this is important. So going through and changing these so that it reads how you want it to read on your PowerPoint is an important component of digital accessibility. So what's next? I just gave you so much information. too much information, but I kind of told you it was going to be that way. Like this is it is something that it you learn a little bit and you try to apply something that you've learned, and then you learn a little bit more, and you apply a little bit more. So this is something that, you might want to hear a couple different times, couple different ways, and then you just kind of start to explore a few of the topics that have been discussed. It's really important to know your resources, which we do have a lot of them. Um, I am going to share a different document out with you that talks about the different resources. We have the SUNY Oswego accessibility website. We have a course that was designed by I apologize, these should have the links. I will be in there in just a couple of moments after we are done. But we do have a course that was designed by the work group on accessibility practices. It's called the Access: A Quest Towards Inclusion. That is going to be available for anyone. That particular course is really helpful because it is meant for students, for staff, for faculty. It is not just for one type of group of students. So anyone can take this course. Be watching out for that. You'll be hearing more information about that this semester. And then we do have the accessibility campus groups. We have a steering committee, digital accessibility steering committee, work group on accessibility practices. I'm a co-chair on it. Kate's very involved in it. I don't know who else is on here, but there's a whole group of people, and I'll share out that link if Kate hasn't done so already. We have the web steering committee, accessibility fellows, all of that. I really must have gotten distracted and did not share the different SELT presentations that are coming. Next Thursday is a big day for digital accessibility. Pretty much just pay attention to Thursday. You'll learn about the tactics to cultivate a culture of access. There's a 20-minute session on contextual hyperlinks, on plain language for text equivalents, the accessibility principles about structured content, and color and contrast. That's all coming next Thursday. So there you go. Does anyone have any questions? I know that was a lot. Kate, did anything come through?
Did what? Did anything come through? No, we didn't hear a single
Okay.
word you said. No, you did a great job. There's a lot of information, but there's a lot to know in general. So, like you said at the very beginning, it's important to know that you need to know, and you don't necessarily need to know everything, but just kind of always being on the lookout for different pieces of information that might be new to you. If you run into questions while working on documents, syllabi, web pages, whatever it is that individuals are working on, coming across something and saying, oh, I wonder if this should be made accessible. If you don't know the answer, feel free to reach out to someone within the work group or check the accessibility website, which I did. I put the links to the accessibility website and the Quest Towards Inclusion course in the chat. So yeah, explore those resources or just reach directly out to Carrie, myself, Sean Moriarty is on here. Anyone who's in the work group is happy to answer questions.
And Sean, this will be a good resource for all the resources and information we need. Yeah, it's a crash
Collection, a
course.
collection. It is. Yeah, you
It is a
covered a
crash
lot.
course, but it's
Yeah.
and I knew that going in. I knew that it was going to be different, a different approach to it. But sometimes you just you don't need every detail about it. You just need to know that these things exist, and you need to, about the WCAG. That was something that I learned well after. It was a while. I heard them talk about it. Never been to the website, never really explored exactly what it was talking about, because that is meant for, I think their original targeted audience was, graphic design and web, that stuff.
More technical kind of things.
Yeah, yeah. So that was, I'm just going to stop sharing.
Yeah.
Um, you
Yeah.
know,
So there's lots in there. I'm gonna also say I'm really excited for the course, Access and Quest Towards Inclusion, uh, that you have coming out. And just since Jason's here, thank him for all of his work that he did. Really, I mean, people see the people that are on the screen and the great quantity of work that was there, but knowing Jason was behind the screens and put it all together made a big difference.
Yep.
That goes along. Jason was definitely absolutely part of learning about the video component that I threw in at the last minute. Probably should have kept out, but it was really important because that was a piece. We all did recordings and we're all proud of our recording. And then we learned that how many messages were being lost by the imagery that we chose within those recordings. And so we all had to go back and essentially re-record to make sure that we weren't missing information. So it's, trying to share some of that information. You don't need to know everything, but just know it exists, that, you know, you want to make it on your radar. You want to make it something that you're considering as you're developing different things.
Great job.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
See y'all later. Have a
All
good
right.
weekend.
Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.